Easterly winds are on their way. How cold will those easterlies be? How long will they last? And will they deliver any snowfall to the UK? I'll be answering all those questions plus much more in this week's Met Office Deep Dive. If you enjoy these kinds of in-depth discussions of the UK's weather and beyond, you'll love our YouTube channel. If you've not already subscribed to it, please do that now and hit like, send us a comment, we might answer you. And we do the Weather Studio Live, of course, on a Friday as well, so you won't want to miss out on those. Hitting subscribe will make sure that you do catch all our latest updates, and it will only encourage us to do more of this sort of thing. The weather is going to change significantly over the next few days across the UK as high pressure arrives and then moves to the east, allowing colder easterly winds to turn up. So I'm going to be covering that at length in this week's Met Office Deep Dive. I'm going to be talking about why high pressure is arriving over the UK and then moving to the east, but I'm actually going to leave that towards the end because that's where it gets really quite complicated. I'm sure you lot will be fine, but it's going to hurt my little brain. So I could do with a more straightforward warm-up first, and that's why I'm going to start off by talking about the sunshine that we're all going to see over the next few days, because we've not seen much sunshine, it's fair to say, recently, and certainly at the time of recording there's an active weather front crossing the country. That's this band of rain here that is moving west to east, but that, apart from the showers that follow, is the last Atlantic-driven weather that we're going to see for some time, because then it's all changed. What we've got at the moment, we've got that cold front moving through. It's attached to a rather deep area of low pressure that's affected Iceland during recent days, and that's moving well to the north. Meanwhile, if I press play here, what you'll see, Tuesday evening, we're starting to see high pressure build in there. Bay of Biscay initially, but it's just going to migrate northwards, and as it does so, skies are going to clear. Yeah, we'll still see some showers overnight, and some of those showers will be falling as snow over the mountains of northern England and Scotland. But apart from those showers, actually plenty of clear skies, so that by the start of Wednesday, it's chilly out there. Temperatures down below freezing in some sheltered spots across the south predominantly, breezier further north, and plenty of blue skies on offer for the start of Wednesday. Finally a bit of sunshine, although not for everyone. Northern England, Northern Ireland, Scotland still prone to those showers. Still a slight Atlantic influence, still got a west to southwesterly breeze. But as you can see, that high pressure is migrating north through the day on Wednesday. By the afternoon, this is 4 o'clock, that high is centred over the southwest. Got plenty of clear skies for England, Wales, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, eastern Scotland. Still some showers in the far north and northwest, but they're fading away. And it's overnight on Wednesday night that clear skies become widespread across the country. That's going to allow these temperatures to fall widely as well. So widely a frost, and the lowest temperatures will actually be across the south and west of the UK, with temperatures dipping in towns and cities, -1, -2 Celsius, but I think in rural parts, -2 to -5. We'll look at the temperatures in a bit more detail in a moment. But as you can see, start of Thursday, yeah, it's a chilly start. There are some freezing fog patches around, but for the vast majority, it's sunny skies and light winds, although there is a breeze blowing through the channel there and across the west and north of Scotland, rather blustery still around the periphery of this high. You can see the isobars tightly packed together there for Shetland, Orkney, the Outer Hebrides. And really that high is sticking around. Thursday is a spectacular day. Wall-to-wall sunny skies up and down the country, all the way from Shetland down to Penzance, and it's just going to be very nice out there. Yes, some patches of cloud, but otherwise it's predominantly just a pleasant, crisp winter's day. It's going to feel quite chilly after that cold start, but temperature's not far from average. We're talking about 5 to 8 Celsius up and down the UK. You'll notice by this stage the high is starting to edge away towards the northeast, and that's the sign of the next big change. It doesn't hang around on top of the UK for long. It is going to set up a new home over Scandinavia. More on that in just a moment, but let's talk about the temperatures over the next few days first of all. You'll notice I'm skipping the weather for the rest of Tuesday and Wednesday. More on that, of course, on our shorter range forecasts in this deep dive. It's more useful, I think, to go a bit further ahead. So This is the temperature trend for maximum temperatures over the next few days. You can see Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday there. They're just slowly ebbing away, really. And so that, we're starting off Tuesday, 10 degrees. By Thursday, 6 to 8. Friday, 5 to 7 Celsius. But it's during Friday and into the weekend, as we start to see the easterlies arrive as high pressure moves into Scandinavia, that's when wind chill will become a little more important. So Thursday, these are the wind chill temperatures, by the way. Thursday, 2 o'clock, it's not that windy. These are the actual temperatures. These are the feels like temperatures. Not a degree or so off because it's not that windy, apart from the south and the far northwest. But by the time we get to Saturday, take a look at this. These are the feels like temperatures. Saturday afternoon, and we're talking about 0 to 2 Celsius across the UK, because now we've got high pressure over Scandinavia and we've got this cold, this raw feeling easterly wind. Now the actual temperatures, the maximum temperatures on the thermometers are not especially low. We're talking about 3 to 5 Celsius, not crazy cold air, 5 or 6 Celsius in places on Sunday. So yeah, it's going to feel cold, but the most important thing is it's going to feel cold rather than it being notably cold. Temperatures are going to be a little below average, but these are the feels like temperatures. It's the wind that's going to feel cold. There will still be some sunshine around through the weekend, but more towards the northwest of the UK. There'll be more cloud arriving into the south and southeast. And with that wind, of course, towards the south and southeast, it's that feel of the weather that is important. The air itself isn't especially cold. Before I explain why and look at the temperature trend into next week, a final thing I want to look at is the minimum temperatures, because they are going to be particularly cold over the next few nights, and then perhaps less cold into the weekend and the start of next week because it will be breezier. So although the character of the air, the feel of the air will be colder by day because of the stronger breeze, by night, conversely, we're going to see the lowest temperatures over the next few nights because of the light winds and the clear skies. So these are the temperatures by towns and cities over the next few nights. Thursday morning's temperatures particularly low. In fact, we could get an idea Thursday morning of what it will likely be away from towns and cities just by running the pen across the map here. So -1, -2, we've got -3s there. Tending to be coldest, I suspect, where we've got the axes of the high around. You can see the winds circulating around the periphery of the UK there, the south. The far northwest there, not particularly frosty because we've got a stronger breeze coming up. Northern Ireland, temperatures hovering around 0 or just below. But yeah, come further into the central part of the UK, and that's where you could see temperatures of -3, -4 Celsius or so in some sheltered spots. So widespread frost Thursday. That's going to be the frostiest start. Still a frost around on Friday. Still temperatures a few degrees below freezing, more towards Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland, northern England, because the centre of the high is drifting away. You'll notice those temperatures still around 1 to 3 Celsius in the south, but less widely below freezing because we've got this breeze picking up with the high moving to the east. And likewise on Saturday, 1s and 2s there across the south. Yeah, frost in places, but we're not talking about well below freezing at this stage because of that breeze helping to stir the air up in its lowest layers. But by this point, it's Northern Ireland, it's parts of central and western Scotland where we're likely to see the clearest skies into the weekend and the lighter winds, and as a result, temperatures below freezing in those locations. So, high pressure will be moving away. We've got the crisp, sunny winter's days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But as high pressure drifts east, here it is on Friday, well to the east of the UK. We've got these isobars ganging together. We've got also, here's the jet stream, by the way, the main branch of the jet stream running well to the north of the UK. Now, if this was summer, it would be rather hot across much of the country because we'd have all this hot air moving north. But of course, when you have a continental influence this time of year, the continents cool down over winter, it's a colder feel. But whilst the main branch of the jet stream is running well to the north of the UK, we've got this other branch that's coming in like so. You might just be able to make out those arrows. And this is just going to cut off from the main branch. So it becomes so elongated around like this, so elongated that this area cuts off. And we see it in action, disappears entirely by Saturday by the looks of it. There it is, cuts off and forms its own little low pressure system that's just to the south of the UK over France. And it's that plus the high moving into Scandinavia that caused the isobars to bunch together and this southeasterly wind. And that low will be introducing some precipitation into the south and east, especially as we go into the weekend. So we've got the winds coming increasingly from the east or southeast as the high pressure moves away and as that low pressure to the south of the UK forms by Friday and into the weekend. But that low and the wind direction will cause, unfortunately, you might think, a reduction in the sunny skies. Let's go back to Friday's weather on here. Well, you can see 2 p.m. Friday. There's the UK. There's that closely packed isobars there across southern parts of the UK. And you can see more cloud coming in across much of England and Wales. And these showers, mostly rain showers actually, but there's a few tiny dots of white mixed in as well. So some wintry content because the air is cooling down. But they're generally light, and they're mostly affecting on Friday the far southeast and perhaps along the south coast. Brisk wind, making it feel cold, as I said. Feels like temperature by Saturday, 0 to 1 Celsius. Maximum temperatures on the thermometer, 4 or 5 Celsius. And here's Saturday's weather. You can see the cloud cover at this stage becoming more extensive across England, Wales into southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. And these blues across the Midlands, East Anglia, the southeast, just indicating the showery precipitation moving in from the continent because of that area of low pressure, basically, into Sunday. And it's very similar, a lot of cloud, quite low cloud, quite gloomy once again across England, Wales. I think brighter skies because of the wind direction coming from the east across Cornwall, West Wales, more especially Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland. But for much of central and eastern UK, it's gloomy. We're going to see those outbreaks of light precipitation. I call it precipitation because it's going to be a messy mixture of rain, sleet and snow. And here's why. We've shown this kind of graphic before in the deep dive, but I'll quickly explain what's going on. It shows the height of the 0 degree isotherm, the height of the freezing level above sea level. So, as you might know, as you go further up in the atmosphere, the air tends to cool down. It doesn't always. Sometimes you get what's called an inversion, where the temperature goes up with height, but on average, the temperature goes down as you go further up. And the height of the 0 degree isotherm, the point in the atmosphere at which you go below 0, is important when forecasting whether it's going to be rain, sleet or snow falling out of the clouds. So when the air is below 0, you're going to get snow, and sometimes a little bit below that as well, because as the snow falls down from the clouds, any falling precipitation will also cool the atmosphere. Something called, well, what happens is the precipitation comes down and it evaporates as it falls through the atmosphere, and you get something called evaporative cooling. Same thing when you come out of the shower, you've got little water droplets on you, you feel a bit colder because that water is evaporating and it needs energy to evaporate, so it's extracting the energy from your body, causing you to cool down. Rain clouds or snow clouds, the precipitation comes out of the cloud, extracts heat energy from the atmosphere in order to evaporate as it falls through the atmosphere. So that's why it's that cooling that means that you can normally expect snow at about 200 metres below the cloud, or the 0 degree isotherm, I should say. So where you've got 0 degrees, go down 200 metres, you've still got snow, even if it's slightly above freezing. And that's what this is showing. Sometimes it's 300 metres, sometimes it's 400 metres. It depends on a few things, most notably the intensity of the precipitation. So the heavier it's falling, the further down you can go, 300 or 400 metres. Now, the grey colours on this chart indicate where the air will definitely be cold enough for snow, so that's 200 metres or below. When you get into these darker blues, it's marginal. This is 9 a.m. Thursday, so let's skip forward to, let's say, Friday evening. And what you can see is, this is the UK, by the way. There's London, there's Belfast, Stornoway, and much of the UK is covered by the grey colours. So that would indicate if you've got falling precipitation, it would be coming down as snow. But there's not much falling precipitation at this stage. It's coming out of that low pressure that's over the continent. So these blue colours here, there's Paris into the London, the southeast. And in that general area, actually what we've got is milder air coming up. Now initially there is some colder air over the southeast, so could see some snow coming down from the southeast on Friday night. But as the night progresses, these milder colours start to move in, so the freezing level rises. And that's because the low pressure system that contains the precipitation is also carrying some milder air. And by early Saturday, what we've got here is some of the blue colours across, say, the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia and the south of England. Patchy, mostly light precipitation, and it's falling out of clouds that are in these kinds of colours as far as the freezing level is concerned. So, yeah, 200 metres or below across parts of Wales and the southwest, the Midlands. More like 400 metres, 500 metres across the East Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. And remember that this is fairly light precipitation, so it's not going to lower that freezing level much as it falls. And so what I'm trying to get at here is that there will be snow in places, but it's mostly light, and it's going to be very marginal, falling through the night and on Saturday morning. In many places, particularly towards the southeast, very marginal about whether it is snow or whether it's rain or sleet. So effectively, we've got early Friday night, cold air across much of the UK, and then this area of rain, sleet and snow moving out the continent, wrapped up within it, milder air, so more likely to be rain, but it then moves westwards across the UK, and it's across parts of the West Midlands, as you can see, towards the southwest and Wales, where it is possible that we'd get a small amount of lying snow by the start of Saturday. But we really are talking about small amounts. This is the rolling snow accumulation between now and up to Saturday morning. So if I fast forward to Saturday morning, this is the total amount of falling snow between now and Saturday. Most of it across England and Wales happens basically on Friday night. As you can see, that's Friday, and then we skip forward to Saturday morning. And yeah, what can we see? 1 centimetre or so across parts of Wales, central, southern England, southwest. So minimal amounts, but yeah, you might wake up in those locations to a small amount of snow on the ground. It might make things look quite exciting, but it's not going to be a huge amount, as you can see. This is the lying snow depth early Saturday, and as you can see, it's patchy. It's 1 centimetre or so at most, patches of snow. And after that, well, we're talking about that air that I mentioned coming up from the continent, wrapped around the low. That's actually going to cause a rise in the freezing levels into Sunday. And what we're more likely to see, if it goes that far, is, yeah, late Saturday into Sunday. These freezing levels are around 400 to 600 metres. What does that mean? It means that this patchy light precipitation is mostly going to be rain, perhaps some sleet, perhaps some snow over the hills, but nothing particularly dramatic. It's generally going to be a grey and damp day on Sunday. So it's Saturday morning that at the moment is the main period that we're looking at for the chance of a small amount of lying snow in 1 or 2 spots. Then through the weekend, we've got the milder air coming up from the southeast, turning it mostly back to rain. Nowhere near as much snow as Japan has seen. Take a look at this. This is absolutely crazy. This is a video. Let's play it back. There we go. Here's a video showing. It doesn't want to play. Okay, this, maybe if I press play, that might work. There we go. This shows the snow in a place called Obihari, I think. Should have checked that. It's on my graphic. I'm going to show you the correct place name in a moment. They had 120 centimetres of snow in 12 hours, which is a national record. 120 centimetres of snow in 12 hours. Here's another video of some poor fella shoveling all that snow. Going to play? There we go. Imagine having to deal with that much snow. So yeah, puts the UK's weather into perspective, that's for sure. Actually, these locations aren't far from the snowiest city in the world. Good pub quiz question for you. What's the snowiest city in the world? It's actually in Japan, a place called Aomori City in the far north of Japan. Now let's zoom right in here. Obihiro, there it is. That's the location with 120 centimetres of snow in 12 hours. And the cause of that is this area of low pressure, which has been sitting there for some time, and it's going to continue to sit just to the northwest of Japan. And we've got what you might describe in the US as lake effect snow. Basically, very cold air coming from Siberia. Really cold air coming from Siberia. Low pressure over the Sea of Japan causes instability and moisture, and then you just got these cold, very cold, moisture-laden winds coming in from the west, bringing heaps and heaps and heaps of snow. And they're expecting more snow there over the next few days. So absolutely incredible. Now, let's move on to what happens next week, because this is, well, a little uncertain, but also there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about with this. Now, first of all, there's actually quite a lot of confidence about the general weather pattern into the start of next week, as you can see by this graphic. This shows the probability plot for various weather patterns that will affect the UK for the next 2 weeks. So the time runs along the bottom there up to the 17th of February. And you can see one, maybe two colours are dominating this graphic. The first colour that will be absolutely the most likely weather pattern for Monday the 10th of February is the Scandinavian high. There are different flavours of Scandinavian high and different flavours of easterly wind. I know that when we get easterly winds or a hint of easterly winds in the UK, a lot of people on social media get excited, and the newspapers get excited as well, because they conflate it with the beast from the east in 2018. But we've had plenty of easterly winds in the winter since 2018, and I'd say the vast majority of them haven't been anywhere near as cold or as snowy as the beast from the east. It all depends on how much of a fetch the easterly has. So you can have an easterly that just picks up air from the near continent, or you can have an easterly that brings air all the way from Siberia into Northern Europe and then the UK, and that's what we saw in 2018, and that's not what we're expecting early next week. So this type of Scandinavian high that is just on the map here is the most likely, situated over Denmark. Let's put the temperature anomaly on and hide the graphic. This is the most likely weather pattern for the start of next week. Basically a continuation of what we've got through the weekend. Feeling chilly in the east to southeast winds, a lot of cloud, perhaps some patchy rain and sleet in places, but temperatures not massively below average. A degree or two, as you can see by the key over here, but because the easterly is bringing air from the near continent and not all the way from Siberia into Eastern Europe and then across the UK, the temperatures aren't as cold as some of the more classic easterlies that have brought a lot of snowfall in the past. And that is the most likely situation for the start of next week. Continuation of the chilly, gloomy for many, a little bit damp weather that we'll see over the weekend, but not your beast from the east classic. However, whilst that is the most likely weather pattern for much of next week, as you can see, that continues through Wednesday and into Thursday to play for Thursday, Friday and Saturday and so on. One of them here, this is the second most likely weather pattern for Thursday the 13th of February. And this does show, as you can see by the temperature anomalies there, a colder easterly. An easterly with a longer fetch coming in from, say, well, Eastern Europe or Scandinavia or perhaps Russia. temperatures several degrees below average. Now, I must stress that this is only the second most likely weather pattern for the mid to end of last week. More likely, this is, I'd say, a small chance, more likely is a continuation of that less cold southeasterly. Either way, we've got high pressure nearby. It's blocking Atlantic systems from coming in. And whether you've got this or whether you've got the other type of easterly, there's a lot of reds. High pressure dominating, that's what that means. And Atlantic weather being kept at bay. The Atlantic weather, low pressure systems, are indicated by these blue colours that only start to creep in towards the end of this 2-week period, the middle of February. And this is where the forecast encounters a crossroads, basically. Will we get more benign southeasterly winds, rather chilly, but nothing particularly dramatic? Will we get a very cold easterly with disruptive snow, currently assessed as only a small chance for later next week, but not the most likely? Or will the Atlantic try to return? And to try and answer that, I want to look back at how the easterlies started in the first place, why we're going to get a week of easterly winds, and what could encourage those easterlies to stick around for longer and perhaps become more potent, and likewise, what could cause those easterlies to break down and move away and allow more unsettled weather to move in. Let's take a look at this first of all. This shows the likelihood of easterly or westerly winds out to the next couple of weeks. The data's on the top there. It goes out to the 18th of February, in the middle of the month. And the colours represent the likelihood of easterlies or westerlies. Easterlies, the more likely they are, the darker the red. The more likely westerlies are, the darker the blues. So the top run of models, or the most recent run of computer models, is on the top there. And as you can see, strong blues over the next few days, strong likelihood of westerlies. Then it switches from Friday into next week, the strong reds. That indicates this strong likelihood of easterly winds. But the strong likelihood of easterly winds for next week hasn't always been the case. When you look back at historic computer model runs and you go back to, say, Thursday of last week, Thursday the 30th of January, and these bottom 3 rows are indicating westerlies are more likely than easterlies throughout much of the first half of February. The blues there dominating. And it was really around the end of Thursday that we started to get this signal for easterly winds becoming more likely, these reds starting to appear. But it wasn't until the weekend that confidence grew significantly, because these reds became stronger and more long-lived through next week. So something in the atmosphere changed at the end of last week to switch the models from favouring westerlies for the first half of February to favouring easterlies over the UK. And that's why, at the end of last week, of course, if you watched our forecast, we were talking about a lower likelihood of easterly winds, but now, at the start of this week, we're talking about a much greater likelihood of easterly winds. Something in the atmosphere changed, and that led the computer models to flip and talk about easterlies rather than westerlies. So what exactly happened? This is where it gets fun, you might say. Complicated, you're more likely to say. And I'm just going to take a look at a different point of view across the Northern Hemisphere here. You can see the Pacific, North America, the Atlantic, and the UK, and this is on Thursday. This is when high pressure builds over the UK. And what I want to draw your attention to is the sequence of events that have led to high pressure forming over the UK. So you go back to the time of recording, start of the forecast. The jet stream is relatively flat across North America and the Atlantic. It's flowing west to east. It's bringing us low pressure. It's bringing us the band of rain crossing the country on Tuesday. Skip forward to Thursday, and I just want to draw your attention to this part of the jet stream. It dives south. That part dives south, which you could imagine it's like cracking a whip. It causes this part of the jet stream to push to the north of the UK and take an area of low pressure to the north as well. And by Friday, a strong jet stream, powerful jet stream, is well to the north of the UK, well to the north of Scandinavia, allowing high pressure to form over Scandinavia. So one way to imagine it is that this dip in the jet stream on the other side of the Atlantic causes equal and opposite effect to happen on our side of the Atlantic. Jet stream pushes to the north, high pressure over Scandinavia forms. But another way of looking at it, which ends up being a bit more complicated but quite useful for tracing the origins of this disturbance in the jet stream, is to talk about something called upper tropospheric divergence. The troposphere, of course, is the lower part of the atmosphere, just below the stratosphere. The jet stream tends to flow around the planet in the upper troposphere. You get highs and lows in the upper troposphere, the same as you get highs and lows at the surface. This is showing the jet stream, it's showing the highs and lows at the surface. But on Thursday, if you imagine, with the jet stream dipping on the other side of the Atlantic, we've not only got surface lows, but we've got a low pressure here as well. So we've got a low pressure here, and to the north of the UK, we've got high pressure over the UK, but we've got this deep low moving out of Iceland, and we've also got a low pressure in the upper troposphere. What happens when you get a surface low pressure and a low pressure in the upper troposphere is you've got all this rising air that then wants to escape. It diverges. So the air is rising through the atmosphere, and then in the upper troposphere, it's escaping in all directions. That's what's causing it to be low in the upper troposphere. So let's draw some arrows to illustrate that. Air in the upper troposphere diverging. These arrows are coming out in all directions from that area of low pressure. Some of the arrows are going to be bigger than others because in some directions those arrows are moving more air than in other directions, and that's partly to do with the way these weather systems are moving about and the way that the planet is spinning. But in this situation, the biggest arrows are actually coming into Scandinavia. So we've got the air escaping from that low, escaping from the dip in the jet stream, and then moving into Scandinavia, where the air then sinks, which is causing that high pressure over Scandinavia to build. Upper level divergence in the upper troposphere, and then sinking air, Scandinavian high. Once that Scandinavian high forms, it becomes a blocking high. It disrupts the jet stream so much that it sticks around through next week. So the question I want to answer now is where that upper divergence has come from, that disturbance in the jet stream. Can we trace the origins of it? Because that might allow us to predict whether it's going to happen again and encourage the high pressure over Scandinavia to stick around, or if it doesn't happen again, will we see a return of the westerly winds around the middle of the month? That's what this is going to help us to answer, so it is going to be worth sticking around. And if I can just about explain it, we'll see, in a way that we all understand, maybe it will help us to predict how the weather could change mid-month. So that area in which the arrows are moving out of the area of low pressure can also be shown on this diagram. It's not my graphic, it's coming from a website, www.aliciambentley.com, really useful website with lots of technical graphics. And so this one isn't particularly easy at a glance to understand what's going on, but let me paint a picture for you. We're looking straight down at the North Pole. There's the North Pole in the middle. There we've got North America. There's the Atlantic, there's the UK, and there's Scandinavia. So in this instance, we're interested in Scandinavia because that's where the high pressure is building. And this is a snapshot of midnight, 5th going into the 6th of February. So the start of Thursday, or the start of Thursday, the point at which high pressure is beginning to build over Scandinavia. And the arrows I drew on the other graphic can also be seen here. These black arrows, there's lots of them, but there's in particular a lot of black arrows coming out of that low pressure area between Iceland and Greenland and moving into Scandinavia. So in this diagram, it shows a lot of different things. It shows the jet stream, it shows various different technical things, but the important idea is that we've got the arrows there indicating this upper tropospheric divergence, where the air is moving out of an area of low pressure, and then the arrows point to where that air is moving into and therefore building the surface pressure. If we rewind the clock 24 hours and go back to midnight tonight, then this shows that those arrows actually can be traced to a disturbance on the other side of the Atlantic, and there are more arrows here. There's the eastern side of Canada. There's Greenland, so just south of Greenland. Over the Atlantic, we've got a lot of arrows moving in a number of different directions, but the biggest arrows are pointing towards the west or southwest of the UK. They're helping to build the high pressure to the south of the UK. And just taking those off and going back to the time in question, we've got these lows here. And basically, if you can imagine, the air is coming out of those low pressure systems and then sinking in the region of this area of high pressure. That's what we're seeing with this graphic, these arrows. But those arrows can be traced to a disturbance 24 hours earlier, just over the northeastern parts of the US and Canada. And we've got arrows again moving out. We've got this area of divergence, this area where air is escaping from the top of the troposphere. And rewinding it a step further, and it all gets a bit messy and a bit hard to make out a clear signal, because we've got North America, we've got the Rockies, and they help to break up the signal a little. It's much clearer when this moves over the ocean. But the arrows in question are, at this point, over eastern parts of the US and Canada, or western parts of the US and Canada, I should say. And going back 24 hours before again, so this is the end of the weekend. This is Sunday night, I believe. And we've got the arrows, quite a lot of arrows, pointing into western parts of North America. Would help if I got my directions right. And coming out of the Pacific. And just skipping forward again, and we're seeing more and more of these arrows by this time, Saturday night, more and more of these arrows, or Friday night I should say, coming out of the Pacific, most especially coming out of an area just to the northeast of Hawaii. And the final one to point out, because this is the crucial bit. This is Thursday night going into Friday, the 31st of January, and it's this area here that I've traced back from the Scandinavian high all the way across the Atlantic, all the way over North America to Thursday night, and it's an area over Hawaii where we've got loads of arrows kicking off, exploding out in all different directions, but the biggest arrows heading east or northeast into the Pacific towards North America. And basically this is a tremendous area of energy coming out from the surface area of low pressure into an upper area of low pressure and spreading out in all directions in the upper troposphere, but most especially heading east across the Pacific. So this energy that helps to perturb the jet stream at this point, and that disturbance in the jet stream then begins a chain of events that ends up with Scandinavian high pressure building and lasting through next week. So what was that low pressure that caused that tremendous disturbance and chain of events that have led to our weather being affected? It was this. This was last Thursday. Hawaii slammed by triple threat of severe thunderstorms, blistering wind, blizzard-like snow. A deep area of low pressure, really quite deep, hit Hawaii and brought terribly impactful weather and very unseasonable weather for Hawaii. They don't get lows like this often, and it brought a winter storm basically for Hawaii, and it was deep enough that it then just produced this huge amount of energy that went into the upper troposphere and propagated into the jet stream, causing a chain of events, causing a disturbance that has led directly to Scandinavian high pressure and easterly winds for the UK. Bearing in mind this happened on Thursday, Friday. That low happened on Thursday and Friday, and that was when the computer models realised basically that the jet stream was going to be impacted in that way, and we were going to see that chain of events that led to the easterly winds being forecast for this next week or so, rather than westerly winds. So perhaps before Thursday, Friday, the models were underestimating how deep the low would be, how it would interact precisely with the jet stream, all of that stuff. But it just goes to show that a small little disturbance on the other side of the planet can then cause a chain of events that ends up completely upending our ideas of what the weather will do in a week or 2 weeks' time. So the reason I'm covering all of this is to ask the question whether it could happen again, and if it happened again, what would be the consequence for the Scandinavian high that's going to stick around for next week? Or are we going to go back to business as usual, westerly winds? And this is why there's a somewhat of a crossroads in the forecast around the middle of February. There's one scenario in which high pressure over Scandinavia moves further north and we get much more potent. Let's draw some arrows on the map. So there's one scenario in which high pressure later next week moves further north and we get a more potent easterly. That's not the most likely outcome. It's one possibility, but it's looking like a small chance at the moment. There's another scenario where we keep more of the same, high pressure over, say, Denmark and more of a southeasterly with low pressure sitting out here, and something of a blocked situation where we've got benign southerly winds or perhaps some rain coming into the west at times, but otherwise not much movement. We've got the high to the east, low to the west. And then there's a third scenario where these lows in the Atlantic move in, the jet stream becomes more powerful. And when the computer models are suggesting these three different scenarios, and we're not entirely sure, more than a week ahead, which one's the most likely, we look at teleconnections. We look at things like what's happening over the Pacific. And there's one important thing that could take place in the Pacific over the next few days, which could, like the storm over Hawaii, cause a chain of events that would lead to a strengthening of the high pressure over Scandinavia and the easterlies becoming more long-lived into the middle of February and perhaps colder. And that chain of events could be sparked off by the Madden-Julian oscillation phase. And I'm not going to explain what the Madden-Julian oscillation is in detail here. We've covered it in a previous deep dive. And there's an explainer on the Met Office Learn About Weather channel on the Madden-Julian oscillation. But just very quickly, it's a pulse of enhanced tropical rainfall that tends to slowly circle around the world in different phases. At the moment, this enhanced precipitation, this enhanced area of thunderstorms is over the maritime continent and Indonesia, Borneo and so on. It's going to move into the Pacific, and there are two possibilities. There's some uncertainty in the modelling over the next few days about whether it becomes particularly active over the West Pacific by early next week, or whether it fizzles away. The European model would suggest it's going to fizzle away, but the Met Office model would suggest it's going to become more active, and the Met Office model recently has been modelling it a little bit better. So there's a potential for that enhanced area of thunderstorms to move into the Pacific, and that could do similar things to that Hawaii storm. It could cause the jet stream to, again, absorb all this energy, become more wobbly across the world, and allow that high pressure to become reinforced across Scandinavia. Meanwhile, there's something else we're looking at, which is the stratospheric polar vortex. And the stratospheric polar vortex is this very powerful ring of winds that circle around this very cold air called the stratospheric polar vortex in the stratosphere above the North Pole. And throughout the winter, the stratospheric polar vortex and the winds circulating around it have been very strong. That tends to enhance westerlies across the northern hemisphere. It's not the only thing that affects the westerlies, but it can act as a tailwind and enhance those westerlies, basically. This graphic from ECMWF shows the strength of the winds circulating around the stratospheric polar vortex. And at the moment, they're very strong. And each of these lines represent a different computer model simulation. So there's 50-odd computer model simulations that show the strength of those winds, and most of them decelerate those winds through to early next week. The reason behind that is because of the Scandinavian high pressure. You can have high pressure in the lower atmosphere that then, because of the jet stream becoming very undulating and weaker, that can have an impact and slow the stratospheric polar vortex, and as a result, we've got this weakening. But it rebounds through next week. That's what the suggestion from these models are. It rebounds. So the main question mark is whether the weakening of the stratospheric polar vortex, the mean wind at the height of the stratosphere, many kilometres above the surface, whether that weakening is going to encourage the Scandinavian high pressure to stick around for longer, and whether the Scandinavian high will cause it to weaken further, and there'll be this positive feedback type of thing, and maybe the Madden-Julian oscillation phase will also feed into that. Or, once it rebounds later next week, could it then force the westerlies to return at the surface, force that high pressure over Scandinavia to weaken, and we end up with low pressure over the UK, milder, wetter and windier and so on. So 2 main question marks. The strength of the enhanced thunderstorms that are moving into the Pacific as a result of the Madden-Julian oscillation phase, and how much they will have a consequence and set off a chain of events that cause the jet stream to wobble about and strengthen the Scandinavian high by middle of February, and how much stratospheric polar vortex will weaken or wobble or move, and how much of a consequence that will have on the high pressure over Scandinavia. Or will it re-strengthen and send us a powerful jet stream and low pressure from the middle of February? We simply don't know which route it's going to go at the moment. We can say what those options are. We can say what the consequences would be if one of those options was more powerful than the other. My feeling is that we're going to end up with a battleground situation, with low pressure just sitting to the west of the UK, high pressure to the east, and a subtle difference in the position of those systems will lead to either cold and dry or mild and wet. It will only take a subtle difference, and we're talking about 10, 14 days ahead, so it would be foolish to say for sure which exact scenario we're going to see at this stage. But of course, we'll keep you updated right here at the Met Office on all of that. And yeah, please do hit subscribe to stay up to date with all of those videos that we do.